name is Sarah Rae. Welcome back to my channel. Today is a true crime and makeup video. We are doing the West Memphis 3 case, and if you have not heard this case, you are truly in for a ride. Now, this is a case that I've researched for a long time, much like the Nicholas Barclay case, and that's going to happen for the first few cases. They're going to be cases that I've really are cases that I know, and they're just ones that I just want to talk about. But I do want you guys to know that when it comes to true crime and getting them out to you guys, especially like the first case, I am going to remain unbiased for the sake of you guys, because I want you guys to know the facts. And I want you guys to remember that, especially for this case, the facts, not emotions, okay? Because people can have emotions when it comes to cases. And I will remain that way for future cases as well. And let's talk about a little bit of what West Memphis 3 is. So it is unfortunately the tragic triple murder of 3 young boys and the conviction of 3 teens. And it tends to split a lot of people who hear this case. So make sure you guys comment on what you think about this case when you finish watching, because I'm curious to hear about what your guys' opinion on it, okay? So this is going to be a bit of a long one, probably my longest video to date, because I wanted to give you guys the facts, okay? And that means grab popcorn, grab snacks, grab drinks, okay? And let's get into it. So, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications of when I upload, and let's get into the video. If you see me looking down, that is where my mirror is. I'm going to put my hair up, so let's begin. May 6, 1993, 3 8-year-old boys were found deceased in West Memphis, Arkansas, in a place called Robin Hood Hill. Now, the victims were named Michael Moore, Stevie Branch, and Chris Byers. Let's talk a little bit about the boys. Now, Stevie Branch, his full name was Stephen Edward Branch, and he was known as Stevie. He was a second grader at Weaver Elementary School, where he was an honors student. And he was born November 28th, 1984. He was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy with an adorable smile and a sweet personality. He was quite a mama's boy and very liked by his peers. He lived with his mom, Pam Hobbs, his stepdad, Terry Hobbs, and his little sister, Amanda Hobbs, who was 4 at the time of his disappearance. Now, let's talk about the next little boy. His full name is James Michael Moore, but he likes to go by the name of Mike. He was born July 27th, if I remember right, 1984. He was also a second grader, and he was a Cub Scout, and a very proud one at that. He wore his uniform all the time, and he was a born leader. And on the day of his disappearance, he was actually wearing his uniform and a shiny badge, which was kind of like a law enforcement badge, because they always played like this law enforcement game, but he also wanted to be in law enforcement when he grew up. Now, he lived with his mom, Dana, and his dad, Todd Moore. And he had an older sister named Dawn, who was 10 at the time of his disappearance. The next boy is named Chris Byers. He was born June 23rd, 1984, and he had ADHD that wasn't very controlled, I think is the best way to put it. And he was on Ritalin and it didn't really work. He was new friends with Stevie and Chris Byers. And even though they were new friends, they were fast friends. They were like, they've been friends forever. He lived with his mom, Melissa, and his stepdad, John Mark Byers. Now, on the day they went missing, which was May 5th, 1993, that afternoon, Amanda and Pam Hobbs, they walked Stevie home about 2:45 in the afternoon. And Stevie had recently got a bike from his grandfather on his mom's side, so his mom's father. And he couldn't wait to play on that bike, especially because the weather had been crap recently, so he never was able to play on the bike until that day. So they had gotten home, he did his homework, and his mom started dinner. And Michael Moore stopped over and they asked their Stevie's mom if they could go ride bikes. And Pam said yes, but Stevie had to be home by 4:30 because she had to work. So Pam worked at a local restaurant called Catfish Island. And she worked the evening crew. I forgot powder. She worked the evening crew. She worked the evening crew at 5, and she lost her license due to a DWI. So Terry had to drive her to work every evening, and he always had the kids with him because he never left them at home, thank God. And so again, she told the boys to be home by 4:30, and they said okay, and they went off laughing like little boys do. So Chris Byers, he got home a little later and headed straight over to Stevie's house at about 3:30 in the afternoon. And of course, Stevie and Michael had already left. So while Chris was over there, he happened to see that Amanda Hobbs was watching his favorite TV show, which was Muppet Babies. And he asked Pam if he could just stay for a little while and watch an episode. And she said yes. And so he stayed for a little while and watched that episode with Amanda. And he had just this biggest smile on his face. So he watched an episode, and about 4 o'clock he had left the Hobbs residence. I was about to say restaurant. And went looking for the boys. And 4:30 rolled around and Stevie was not home. And we will get more into that here in a little bit. So for the next few hours, multiple people report seeing the boys around the neighborhood. And I want to note that this area is said to be fairly safe. So it's like a place where kids can just go out and not worry about anything and just play, right? So there's a place called Robin Hood Hills, and it is a favorite place for the 3 boys to go play. And it's a forest. It is 4 acres of land between the boys' neighborhood and Interstate 40 in West Memphis, Arkansas. And the parents get nervous about the boys playing in those woods because of the location. It is right near this truck stop called the Blue Beacon Truck Stop. The Blue Beacon Truck Wash, I'm sorry. And it's a place where the truckers can park their semis and get them washed, get a bunch of other places like restaurants and for the truckers to rest and things like that. And it's important to note that Interstate 40 is one of the most busiest highways. So back to Robin Hood Hills, right? There is this long pipe that separates the north part near the interstate and the area by the neighborhood. So the boys would make sure not to cross that pipe. And there's also a drainage ditch near that pipe that the boys would call the Devil's Den. So the boys would make sure not to cross that pipe. And there's also a drainage ditch near that pipe that the boys would call the Devil's Den. Now the last time anybody would see the boys was around 7 p.m. And the first to be reported missing was Chris Byers by his dad, John Mark Byers. And according to the report taken by Officer Regina Meeks, the last time John saw Chris was about 5:40, and he was riding his skateboard. And Chris was meant to be home so the family could go out to dinner together. But when they couldn't find Chris, after looking around the neighborhood, that it wasn't a big deal. And so they went to the Moore's residence. I can't say residence. They asked about Chris, and they said they haven't seen them, and they also couldn't find Michael either. And so at 8:20, they tried reporting Michael missing. I can't speak today. Missing to Regina Meeks as well. Dana did. And Officer Regina Meeks decided not to officially take that statement. She just decided that if in like an hour he's still missing, to let her know. Now, this part is a bit random, and there's like a few theories that come from this, so stick with me. Okay, so at 8:42, Officer Regina Meeks gets a call to the Bojangles over by that blue wash place on the other side of Robin Hood Hills. And it's said that there is a man covered in blood hiding out in the woman's bathroom. So, you know, being unbiased, but what is truly a failure in this case is that Officer Meeks takes a drive to the Bojangles, and she never goes into the Bojangles to take a look. She goes through the drive-thru to take the statement from the manager, and even when he asks her if she wants to come in, she just tells him to tell her what he saw. And so he did. He stated he saw this tall black man who was either bleeding or covered in blood come in about 30 minutes before Regina Meeks got there. And he had stumbled into the woman's bathroom and stayed there. And he had smeared blood all over the walls while going into the bathroom as well. So the manager made it known that the man had left a little bit ago on foot behind the restaurant and was headed north past the dumpster. And she could easily catch up, like she was in a car, right? Or she could, collect evidence, but, failure in this case because she don't do either of those things. Anyways, Michael Moore is reported missing at 9:24, and I think it's time to go back to Stevie Branch. So Terry got home from work around 4 p.m. and asked where Stevie was, and Pam said he was still outside playing and was told to be home around 4:30. And when that time rolled around, they went out driving looking for Stevie, and they couldn't find him. And Terry said it was getting too late in regards to Pam needing to go to work. So they just took Pam to work, and he would continue searching for Stevie, who he calls Frog Legs, which is totally not cool, after he gets home. And what happens when Terry got home, that won't be known until years later, so I'm going to save that for the end. And we're just going to continue when he goes to pick up Pam, and that is for a few reasons. So Terry goes to pick up Pam from the Catfish restaurant, and he doesn't say anything to her. He just heads straight to the payphone, and she doesn't think this is too strange. This is kind of Terry, but she goes and gets 2 gumballs, one for Stevie and one for Amanda, and heads to the car to only find Amanda. And when Terry gets done and comes out to the car, she asks him, "Where is Stevie?" and she begins to worry. And he states that he never came home and he just called the police to report him missing. So if you guys haven't guessed, yes, it's Regina Meeks. Officer Regina Meeks gets this call too and heads out to take this statement from when Pam saw him last. What he was wearing and who he was with, right? The sad thing is that the night a search wasn't done on the cops' end, right? Okay? that night you saw a search for those 3 boys who were missing, and it was from the community, okay, not from the cops. And okay, remain unbiased, Sarah, okay? Maybe they were busy, maybe they were doing something else, okay? But the community and the area they lived in, the main focus that they paid attention to were those woods. And they searched until midnight came. And until it was too late and way too hot to continue searching. And by that point, nothing was sadly found. So let's move on to the next day, May 6th, 1993. So 5:30 a.m., right? John Mark Byers, Todd Moore, who just came home from work to find out his son is missing, which must be a horrible way to come home. Him, Terry Hobbs, Jackie Hicks, who is Pam Hobbs's father, so the grandfather who gave Stevie the bike, and they all went to search for the boys. So they got up at 5:30 and continued searching. So at 9 a.m., the police finally got involved and started a huge search that contained multiple different police forces, the community, search and rescue, to search those woods. And they did for hours, finding nothing. And that is until this juvenile probation officer, his name is Steve Jones, makes a huge find. And he finds this black tennis shoe floating in the creek. And he calls other officers to come and look at the shoe, right? And they realize and decide that someone has to go into the creek and look. And this officer, his name is Brian Ridge, he says he will do it. And he gets on his hands and knees and searches this 3-foot deep creek bed for these boys. And it must be horrible because you're searching this murky water in hopes to find something, but the feeling he must be feeling. So as he's feeling around, he gets caught on something at the bottom, which he pulls up, and it is the body of Michael Moore. One of the places I used for information was the documentary Paradise Lost. And the opening footage is them finding the bodies of these boys. And it is something you can't unsee. And it is truly heartbreaking knowing what all happened to them. It's just... Moving on. So the officer places Michael on the side of the creek bed, and then they continue searching for the other boys, knowing that they must be in. And they find Stevie Branch. And then when they found these boys, they were completely naked, and their wrists were tied to their ankles. And I want to say a thank you to Stephanie Harlow, because the boys were always reported as being what's called hog-tied, but they weren't. So hogtied is when your right wrist is tied to your left ankle, and your left wrist is tied to your right ankle. But these boys were tied their right wrist to their right ankle, okay, and their left to their left. They were not hogtied, but that's the way they were found. So you can, I am going to tell you a little bit about how they were found. If you want to skip a little forward, you can, if you don't want to hear that. Each boy's knots were tied differently, so this must indicate that there were multiple different killers. Michael was beaten badly. He had a lot of damage to his face and head. Stevie Branch had lacerations to his neck, face, and head. He also had several bite marks. And Chris Byers was found face down. He was also badly beaten and was found to be castrated. So the boys' bodies and clothes were anchored to the bottom of the creek bed with sticks, and the bikes were found not too far away. So they were found. Hey, thank you. They were found right where the pipe is, and that pipe I told you about earlier, that's where the bikes were, and they were anchored as well. And it's got to be such horrible news to find out about. And there is a video of Pam getting that news, and she just collapses to the ground in agony and pain, screaming, and it is also a heartbreaking sight. So Detective Gary Gitchell states that it is a triple homicide, and the local police actually declined the help from the state police, which is something I can't understand why. And they told them that it's a local matter. But the one thing they did right when they started their investigation was they kept information from family news outlets and things like that. And that is because it's a tactic. So when they are interviewing people, if they say something that hasn't been released, they know that they have found somebody who was there. So, except this didn't last long, because the Memphis Commercial Appeals, they used their newsroom to kind of hack and listen to the police scanners to get information to the case. Then the next day, all over the news and the papers, the headline, "Satanic Panic Spread." And let me just finish this little eye, and we will talk about this little thing. Okay, so satanic panic. Let's talk about satanic panic and why in the 90s it came to a head and exploded, right? So let's note that in West Memphis, it is in the middle of the Bible Belt, right? So they are very religious people, okay? Now, in the 90s, well, I should say leading up to the 90s, we saw cases like the Manson murders, We saw Jonestown Massacre. We saw the Zodiac Killer, Son of Sam. And you can even throw in Ted Bundy, you know. Many cases in the 80s and 90s had like this intention of cults and satanic suggestions. So something I want to do a video on is how the music we love, my rock stars, we love rock and roll, but in 1989 there was a Christian documentary called Hell's Bells, The Danger of Rock and Roll. And it's a documentary talking about how rock and metal music was the devil and satanic music, and how it supports drugs, sex, and rebellion. And note that the big reason they thought that satanic was the big thing here for this case was the whole castration of Chris Byers, which, I mean, it could be, but I mean, there's not enough solid evidence to prove satanic. I mean, it could simply be a sick serial killer. And I'm not being biased. I'm simply giving options and facts. So remember that for the rest of the video. So a juvenile officer named Jerry Driver, good old Jerry Driver, he goes to the police hearing this and gives 8 names he thinks that could be involved, not could be, are involved in satanic activity. And so let's meet our West Memphis 3. Our 3 boys. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Jason Baldwin, who is 16. Jason Miskelly, who is 17. And Damien Echols, who is 8. Which I would like to give a little bit of background on all 3 of these teens. And also how they got on, like, the big thing that got them on the police radar. So let's first talk with about Jason Baldwin. So he's 16 years old, the youngest, and Jason and some friends, I don't know if it's a junkyard of cars, but it's private property, and he and his friends, they went and broke some stuff on the property and goofed off, as I imagine teenagers to do. And this is like the big offense that he did that really got him noticed by the police. But Jason is said to be very sweet. He's very smart and gentle. His neighbors even trust him with their kids, and he's very good with them. He wore black, he wore concert tees, he wore his hair long, and he was best friends with Damien Echols, who is someone we will talk about very shortly. Next is, we'll talk about Jesse Miskelly Jr. And he is 17, and he has an IQ of 72, which is considered mentally disabled. And so I want to give you guys an idea of what that's kind of like mentally. So someone with that IQ has like a mentality of a 5-year-old. So know that comes with no disrespect. That is just facts. Now, Jesse struggled in school to the point that he actually dropped out, and he joined his dad to work on cars. And his big thing that got him noticed on the police's radar was that he stole flags from the school's marching band because he wanted to create a racetrack in his backyard, and he needed flags, and you can see that mentality there. But in the end, he's also said to be very disrespectful, very respectful, and very helpful. So, and now we're going to talk about Damien Echols, and I really want to go in more deeper than what we've done. So we are going to talk about the ringleader. That's what they call Damien. So Damien was 18 at the time of the crime, and his life has been considered very traumatic, and a lot of stays in psychiatric hospitals. So he's had it quite rough. So much so that I guess it's just that I don't think it's fair, because okay, I'm going to interject my opinion for a second. Okay, so they used his psychiatric and juvenile records against him in court. And I don't think that's fair, because that's like saying someone like me is capable of... Okay, so we are going to dive deeper into Damien Echols, and that's who we're doing next, because he was classified as the ringleader, and his story is, I think, just needs a little bit more explanation, and you'll understand and see why. So let's just begin. Now, he was 18 at the time of the crime, and his life had a lot of trauma and stays in the psychiatric hospitals, and just he had a rough life. And you know, I normally stay very, like I said at the beginning, unbiased, but I do want to give my opinion here, just one time. But during his conviction, they used his juvenile record and his psych records against him. And I don't think that is fair at all, because they claimed that all those are the reasons for him to be a murderer. And that's like saying someone like me is capable of murdering someone. And I just don't agree with that. And I hope you get why I wanted to add that in here. Anyways, Damien and his life. He moved around a lot, and when I say that, I mean like 6 states in 2 years. And his family was quite poor. And also, when I say quite poor, I mean like he lived in shacks with no like heating or bath water. So quite poor. And he didn't have very much trust in people, or adults, I should say. And according to his book, Life After Death, Jack Echols, and this is where I'm getting a lot of my information for him, so take it with what you want, okay? So Jack Echols is his stepfather, and he was the first real bad example Damien had with religion. And that's because Jack was very religious. But that didn't really stop Jack from being abusive and bullying towards Damien. But one good thing that came from Jack being like a stepdad towards Damien was that he didn't care really what Damien wore or listened to. So, remember back with the whole satanic panic thing. He just didn't care, if he wore black or had his hair dyed or whatever. So Damien's first name real name is actually Michael, which he changed not to match the character in The Omen, the Antichrist, but because of actually the Catholic religion. And the story goes that he was going over saints and came across the name Father Damien, and he thought it was a much better name than Michael. And so he chose the name Damien. At 16, he met a girl named Deanna, who was a Wiccan, a pagan. And Damien was the type of person, he was very smart, and so he researched for something outside of the Catholic religion, and he researched her religion, but didn't commit, okay, so that's a big thing to note. And he was very well read, so he realized that you could be religious and I'm saying that wrong. You can be spiritual without being religious and still reach a higher power. On the last day of school, the two decided to run off together, and they were going to run to California. And they did this because of Deanna's parents. They didn't like Damien. And so they took off on foot with Jason Baldwin. And they ended up going to this unused trailer. And this is when the police found them. Jason actually at this point had left before the police had got there. And they think that the reason the police had found them was because of Deanna's parents. But it's so romantic. The police, when they catch the two, they both get arrested, and they swear to find each other, and they kiss, as this is going to be the last time they see each other. So romantic. Now, back to Jerry Driver. So they take Damien to Crichton, I think is how it's pronounced, Crichton County Jail. And again, we meet Jerry Driver, and he, remember, with the 8 names. And reason these guys are in here, and all this happened with the whole satanic thing, is because Jerry had found Deanna's notebook, and it was filled with the whole pagan thing, because of course she was pagan again. And so he confronts confronts Damien about this notebook. and about Satanism and the devil worship and everything about that type of situation. And Damien knows nothing about this type of situation or type of topic, I guess you could say. And Jerry at that point becomes, I guess you could say, hooked and obsessed. So Damien also unknowingly gets questioned for a psych eval, and they state that we've got a bed for him. And during this time, Jerry Driver actually gets permission to go search Damien's room, where he finds his posters, his journals, and his skull collection, and a lot of other things. And he also unprofessionally starts spreading rumors around town about Damien and the type of things he was in, he's into devil worship and things like that. Just so unprofessional. And they were so untrue. So Jerry also starts calling the police on Damien many times, and then Damien also gets put in the mental hospital at one point due to his mom, and she actually kicks him out because of a comment he made that gets completely misconstrued. And but eventually he does get his GED. I forgot he dropped out of school I think it was his senior year. But he gets his GED. His medical records are 500 pages long. Whew, they were a lot to read. It's crazy. And he ends up meeting, starts dating this girl he already knew, and her name's Dominique. And they end up having a baby together, which is so sweet. So let's run down the things that led to them getting arrested, right? So May 6th, the day the boys were found. So Damien has stated that he never knew the boys, and there was actually no record of him ever knowing them. So, there it is. So, on May 8th, he is talked to by a few officers, and it's not known that he's a suspect at that point, but he gets brought in for an interview, and he states a few things that makes them kind of think he did it. So he says things like how he thought the killer would have been, May 8th, Damien talked to a few officers who don't make it known he's a suspect. He goes for an interview and states a few things. So he states that he thought the killer would have probably felt good that he had the power to do what he had done. He also figured the killer probably knew the boys and that they went in the woods, and that he might have actually asked them to go into the woods. And lastly, he also thought that the boys were not big or smart, and they would have been easy to control. And lastly, he thought that the killer would not have been worried about the boys screaming due to the fact that it's in the woods and close to an expressway. So, again, I mentioned about the whole unbiased thing, but I think I'm going to say one more opinion. You guys, I've been into true crime for a long time, okay? And if something like this happened where I am, I could probably No, not probably. I would be able to say those exact remarks. And the reason for that is because of all the research and videos I've watched and done. I, much like Kendall Rae has stated, almost feel like I could understand a killer's mind. And Damien actually is a lot like that as well. He was into true crime and watched it all the time. So, now, Damien, you can't judge a person by what they're into or what they look like. That don't make them a killer, okay? He read Stephen King. His tattoos, I mean, he has evil on his knuckles. They brought all of that in court. The music he listens to, Metallica, he dresses in black. I'm wearing black. Like, I've listened to Metallica. I read Stephen King. That doesn't make him a killer. You guys, these are the things that they brought into court to prove that he's a Satanist and he killed these boys. So, why did things go wrong? How did they get these boys? The boys brought in Jesse since they felt they were not getting what they wanted out of Damien's unrecorded interview. And I mean, they did feel like Damien had knowledge of the crime, that he said some cryptic statements, that he had guilt, and he had a demeanor of a killer. But they still felt like they weren't getting what they wanted. So they brought in Jesse. Remember, Jesse has this IQ of 72, and he has a mentality of a 5-year-old. So they questioned him. Only with a mentality of a 5-year-old, they only want to please whoever they are talking to. So, Jesse was questioned for 6 hours, unrecorded, before he confessed to a triple homicide. Oh, and to note, he got almost everything about the murder wrong. All the details. I mean, at one point, he said that they were tied with rope when they were tied with shoestring. Unbiased. That they skipped school and the murder took place in the afternoon. Yeah. This guy is guilty 100%. Alright guys, sorry about the bad lighting. I hope you guys enjoyed the first part of the video. I'm breaking it down into 2 parts. That's why editing Sarah is here and it's dark. Because what I've got is way too long of a video and I just don't want to put out a hour-and-a-half video to you guys, so I'm going to break it down into 2 parts. So they will come out one right after another, don't worry about that. And so I hope you guys enjoyed the first part. Thank you guys for watching and stay tuned for the second part. Thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for watching and see you guys in part 2. Bye.